Brian opened the shed. Sweet cherry stench, a hidden door, and drawings signed Cody. His missing son had been right there all along, but what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The heat hung low over Ash Ridge that evening, the kind that blurred the edges of things, made time feel slower, sleepier, almost kind. Crickets chirped rhythmically from the hedges as golden light spilled across front lawns. In the Harrington yard, Cody laughed as he chased the ball, barefoot and wild, the scuffed tips of his jeans just brushing the grass. He was the kind of boy who wore curiosity like a second skin, who asked about gravity while brushing his teeth and collected frogs like they were treasure. Brian watched with a tired smile, red pen in hand, half listening to the bounce of the ball and the shuffle of sneakers against pavement. One more paper, he thought. One more grade, and then maybe a game of catch before dinner. But the laughter stopped. The ball struck the curb and veered into the road. Then nothing. Not a rustle, not a whimper, not even the hurried footsteps of a child returning. Brian stood, the tea glass trembling slightly in his hand. "Cody?" he called out, first with a hint of play, then urgency. He jogged to the street, scanning the yard, the sidewalk, behind the neighbor's hedge. Empty. The only movement was the slow, almost cruel spin of the red ball in the gutter. By the time the sun dipped fully below the horizon, chaos had replaced comfort. Police cruisers flanked the street. Floodlights lit up every corner. Neighbors huddled on lawns, voices low and eyes wide. Tessa arrived from work in hysterics, her heels discarded somewhere on the sidewalk. She collapsed in Brian's arms and screamed his name over and over, as if willing the ground to crack open and return their son. For days, Ash Ridge became a town of maps and markers. Yellow tape sectioned off ditches. Forest trails were combed by people who'd once only used them for Sunday strolls. Brian joined every search party. He scanned the same roads again and again, refusing to accept that silence could be so final. He spoke to anyone, everyone, postal workers, joggers, delivery drivers, anyone who might have seen something, anything. But there was no witness, no footage, no car, no clue. Just a boy who had ceased to exist between one heartbeat and the next. Brian's classroom gathered dust. Tessa stopped answering the phone. Friends brought casseroles and prayers, but no one could offer what they truly needed. Hope calcified into ritual, setting Cody's place at the table, lighting a candle on his birthday, walking the neighborhood every night with a flashlight, long after even the police had given up. And yet, through it all, Brian remained tethered to a single, nagging feeling. Someone knows, not some distant stranger, not a passing drifter, but someone close, someone who walks the same sidewalks, someone who had been watching, waiting, just beyond the frame. 8 years hadn't dulled the edges of grief for Brian Harrington. It had merely changed their shape. Time had softened the raw panic into something quieter, more corrosive. He no longer cried in public or yelled at traffic lights when no one was watching. Instead, he watched. Not just the streets or the woods anymore, but people. Every habit, every pattern, every tiny oddity. And no one in Ash Ridge drew his focus more than Daniel Whitaker. Daniel had aged in the years since Cody's disappearance, but so had everyone. The white in his beard spread like frost. His gait grew stiff, his voice slower, more gravelly. Yet there was something about him that remained curiously constant. His routines, his precise lawn, the shed. Brian had offered to help fix Daniel's gutters last spring, and again to replace cracked pavement by the side of the house. Each time Daniel had smiled, waved him off, and changed the subject. Especially when it came to that shed. It was a modest wooden structure tucked into the shadowed corner of Daniel's yard, beneath a spindly oak tree. From the outside, it looked like any other old-timer's workspace, paint chipping, hinges rusted. But the lock, that was new. Clean, silver, commercial grade. Far too secure for a storage shed that supposedly held only old drills and tangled fishing line. Brian hadn't said anything, just cataloged it like all the other details. The sealed windows, the air fresheners he sometimes glimpsed hanging from the shed rafters when Daniel cracked the door, the faint scent of chemical sweetness that drifted across the yard on warm days, syrupy and out of place. Then came the memory, sharp, uninvited. Cody, 6 years old, tugging on his pant leg during a barbecue and whispering, "Mr. Whitaker smells like metal and cherries, like soda and pennies." Brian had laughed it off at the time, chalking it up to a child's wild imagination. But now, that memory gnawed at the walls of his mind like a trapped animal. Still, suspicion alone wouldn't hold up. Daniel was a veteran, widowed, liked by nearly everyone. He volunteered at the food bank. He once fixed Mrs. Clary's front door for free after her husband died. His record came back clean, nothing more than a traffic ticket in '92. But Brian had lived too long with empty explanations. So he waited, watched, tracked Daniel's routines. On the third Thursday of February, Daniel left for his routine VA checkup out of county. An appointment that, according to previous years, would keep him gone until sundown. Brian's hands shook as he retrieved the bolt cutters from under his coat, the cold steel biting into his palm. He crossed the fence with the quiet calculation of someone who no longer feared consequences, only truth. The lock snapped with a single decisive clank, louder than it should have been. He stared at the shed door, fingers wrapped tight around the handle, breathing in the cherry-sweet air that leaked through the cracks like a perfume soaked in rot. Then, slowly, he pushed it open. The moment Brian stepped inside, the door creaked closed behind him, muffling the world outside into a distant hum, as if Ash Ridge itself had recoiled. The air was thick and wrong, not just from the heavy, saccharine aroma of cherry-scented air fresheners, but from the way it clung to his skin, oily and sour beneath the perfume. The sweet smell wasn't comfort. It was concealment, masking something older, something lived in, something rotting beneath the surface. The tools hanging from the pegboards were spotless. Each hammer, saw, and wrench had its place, polished and positioned with unnatural precision, labels handwritten in small, neat block letters. There was a compulsive order to it all, cold, surgical. Brian's eyes moved across the space, heart drumming so loud it blurred his hearing. He spotted the shelf in the far corner. It looked ordinary, but when he reached it, he noticed the scuff marks on the floor, dragged in short, repeated arcs. The shelf wasn't fixed. It had been moved many times. He braced himself, then shoved. Behind it stood a door. Steel, reinforced with crossbars, fitted into the shed's very foundation. Its presence struck like a thunderclap, not improvised, not accidental, intentional. Brian gritted his teeth and forced it open. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. He fumbled for his phone, the beam from its flashlight slicing through the gloom. The space below wasn't large, maybe 10 by 12 feet. But every inch of it screamed captivity. A mattress, matted and indented. A plastic bucket, still half full with stagnant liquid. Stacks of children's books, Captain Underpants, Goosebumps, dog-eared and worn to the spine. Crayon drawings taped unevenly to the concrete walls. Batman, a rocket ship, a boy with sad eyes and a fading smile. And every one of them signed, Cody. Brian's knees gave out. He dropped to the floor, staring at the evolution across the walls. Early drawings were wild and chaotic, sunshine and houses and stick-figure parents. Then they grew tighter, lonelier. A boy sitting on a bed, a clock with no hands, bars across windows drawn in thick red strokes. Toward the top, the lines sharpened, the proportions matured. Shadows appeared behind the smiles. In the final drawing, Cody had no mouth at all. Brian's gaze fell to the corner, where a small, dusty backpack rested beside a threadbare teddy bear. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a folded-up dental chart from the family clinic, a name sewn into a child's shoe. Cody Harrington. His breath hitched. A sob crawled up his throat, strangling him with guilt and grief. His son had been here. Not miles away, not lost in the wilderness. Here, just steps from his own backyard. Brian rocked forward on his knees, his tears darkening the floorboards. The weight of 8 silent years collapsed onto his chest. And behind it all, the cherry-sweet air lingered, mocking, cloying, false. The moment the news broke, Ash Ridge held its breath like a town waking from a nightmare it had tried to forget. The story exploded across national headlines, devouring airtime and front pages. Father uncovers hidden room where son was held for 8 years. Faces once dulled by routine were now sharpened by horror and guilt. Neighbors who had waved politely, shared holidays, borrowed tools from Daniel Whitaker without ever wondering what lay 20 feet behind his back door. Law enforcement swarmed the property. Crime scene tape cinched the edges of Daniel's yard like a noose. Every item cataloged, every splinter of wood photographed. But no Daniel, not a trace of him since the day Brian broke the lock. His truck was found abandoned at a rest stop 2 towns over, its interior wiped clean. He had vanished, as silently and seamlessly as Cody once had. Weeks passed, each one heavier than the last. Brian didn't eat much. He didn't sleep at all. Tessa stared through windows like they were screens playing a world she no longer recognized. And then, 41 days after the discovery, the call came in from Arkansas. A tip. A child's voice overheard through a paper-thin trailer wall. When federal agents kicked down the door of a rusted mobile home outside Hot Springs, what they found was almost beyond comprehension. Cody sat in the corner on a mildewed mattress, arms wrapped tightly around his knees, his eyes not fearful, but blank, as if whatever had once animated him had been packed away like winter clothes in the wrong season. It took hours before he spoke, days before he said his name, weeks before he let anyone touch him. When Brian arrived at the recovery center, Cody didn't move, didn't speak. He stared through him like one might stare through fog, aware there's something there but unable to grasp it. Brian tried everything, stories, songs, old routines, and then he pulled from his jacket a wrinkled sheet of paper, the crayon drawing from Daniel's hidden basement. 3 figures under a tree. One held a ball, one held a teddy bear, all of them smiling. Cody stared, his lips parted, and in a voice that barely breached a whisper, he said, "I always hoped you'd come." Tessa collapsed into sobs. Brian froze, then reached for him, not as a father reclaiming a son, but as a man finally touching something he had been chasing for 8 long, splintered years. In the courtroom months later, Daniel pled insanity, and the town gasped. But Brian didn't. He had stopped seeking vengeance the moment Cody spoke. What he wanted now wasn't punishment, but presence. Not justice in legal terms, but the slow, painful miracle of restoration. They left Ash Ridge behind, moved somewhere with open skies and no reminders. No locks, just grass and wind and the sound of Cody's feet beside Brian's each evening as they walked. No words were needed. Every step was a stitch, every silence a balm. And when, one evening, Cody laughed, sudden and real and unmistakably his, Brian closed his eyes. The darkness had lifted, the voice had returned, and finally there was light